husband surprised me with a DNA test after a ladies' night and caught me with 3 different STDs. I have 3 STDs, you don't believe me? Well, I'm telling the truth. What is worse? I got it outside of my marriage. I cheated. I think my recklessness has caused my normal life at this point, and I am paying for it now in the most cruel way. My life, which was going well, has been put to a standstill due to my poor decisions. I F38 work as a receptionist at a company. I don't earn much, but it pays my bills. My husband M42 works as an engineer. I'll be referring to him as Marcus. Marcus and I are kind of the regular kind of couple. We did have a routine, and for me, I hate routines. I struggled a lot to keep the marriage up. Well, it wasn't like we had a love marriage or anything. Well, our parents pushed us together, and like always, my parents made a very bad match. My parents and Marcus's parents had this kind of long friendship that dates back to many years. Marcus and I quite all right knew each other since we were little. We kind of liked each other since high school. We did come to dinners at each other's houses, and we normally could always be in each other's company. After high school, we kind of lost contact with each other. I went to a school far away from home because I wanted to experience the world away from my hometown. A few years later, we met again, more like we ran into each other. I was so happy about it because I was reunited with my best friend again. Marcus was elated as well. That very day, we went out for drinks and we got to catch up with each other after a long time. From there, we started talking and it led to us dating. When he had asked me to be his girlfriend, I was happy, but deep within me, I just wanted to see where things would go because I didn't know if I was still the girl he was always with back in high school. I decided to give it a chance and have an open mind. We dated for over a year because I wanted to be sure and not rush into anything. I even told him that we should wait a few months before telling our parents. When he proposed, I accepted his proposal and we started making plans for the marriage. We both went back home for our wedding and our parents were happy for us because according to them, they had been rooting for us for so long. I had always wanted a traditional wedding and I got it. But I thought to myself after the wedding when everything dawned on me. Was married life what I really wanted? Because I was never the one who did well with routine. I didn't like doing the same thing over and over again. And it was like I was suppressing who I really was, which was to fly, to be myself, and not to be weighed down for anything. We returned back and we moved in together. I was the type of woman who was independent and all but Marcus was the traditional kind of man. I found out about this after the wedding when he had asked me to make time for the home. I was speechless. The home how? But I kind of brushed it under the rug. My friends couldn't attend the wedding and so they decided to take me out for drinks. My very good friend Mary and Presh. We actually met at college and ever since we have been inseparable. Mary was the wild one and she was the person who could always suggest we do the craziest things. Presh was the sensible one among us. We usually always partied hard and it didn't stop because I got married. We still went to clubs and so on. I didn't want my life to stop because of that. I went back home after going out with my friends and I met an angry Marcus. I was so tired that I refused to deal with him. We were actually fine after the wedding, but his major problem was the fact that I was not always wearing my wedding band. But I explained to him the reason and he refused to buy it. In order not to cause any problems, ignored him and I went to sleep. The next day we got ready for work without speaking with each other and we left. Marcus always does this even when we were still children. Whenever he was angry with me, he could always go days without speaking with me. And I also told myself I was not going to put up with that behavior anymore. You are an adult and you are supposed to work things out. We are not children anymore. A few weeks later, we had worked things out and Marcus told me that he was going to travel for a few weeks and he left. I knew about his work. They did travel a lot, but before the wedding, he had to take a break and right now he is back to work. Marcus was a good person, don't get me wrong. He worked hard to provide for us, but I think I was the problem. I wanted more out of life and I wanted to get everything I wanted no matter how small because I knew it could keep me sane. And one of the things that usually kept me sane was hanging out with my friends and traveling. Marcus had promised me that he could travel with me, but I haven't seen that yet because he was busy with work. I went to work and I did all I could before I left. My boss and I had a history before I got married, and even after marriage, he hasn't stopped coming after me, but I kept on ignoring him. It was easy because I had to see him every day at work. But when I found out that he was not going to let me be, I decided to just go out with him for dinner that evening. It couldn't hurt anyone, right? Fisher, my boss, is a goal-getter. He gets anything he puts his mind to, so before meeting Marcus, we did sleep together, and once after I started dating Marcus. I stopped because I discovered that Marcus was serious about our relationship. The dinner went well. I told him about Marcus and how we are trying to make things work, and also about how I loved him and how Marcus loved me too. I told him we had known each other since we were children, but I knew I was boring Fisher because he went straight to tell me how much he wants to be with me. I told him that it was not going to be possible, but one thing led to another. We ended up sleeping with each other that day. The next day, I woke up at the hotel and I went home. I knew I had to stop doing this. It has not looked good since I was married. But I needed Marcus here with me, but I knew it was not going to be possible because he needed to work. But I kind of wished he put me first instead of work, but we'll be fine because I could do what I wanted without him finding out. And also, how is it possible that he was faithful where he was? I knew it wasn't possible. So I used that to console myself and went on with my life. I told my friend about what I did. I knew it was cheating, and since I was married, it was even worse. My friends didn't support what I did either, and they advised me to stay away from my boss, but how is that going to be possible since we work together and we see each other every day? My advised me to not engage him. I made up my mind that I was going to give him space, but it wasn't going to be easy. A few days later, Marcus returned from his trip and he was all touchy with me. It looked like he missed me, but deep down I was feeling so guilty about what I did. I couldn't tell him because I knew that it could definitely ruin our marriage for good. Marcus decided that he was going to spend a whole week with me, and so he took a break from work. It was just 3 days though, but I knew I could just go along with it. At least it was better than nothing. Marcus took me out and it was wonderful, but I kept thinking about my affair. But Marcus really tried to please me. I must give him credit. He was trying, but I think I was the problem. What he was giving me was not enough for me. Some days he is there and some days he is in another state. A few weeks later, Marcus traveled and returned telling me about how we needed to go back home and how we haven't seen our families since the wedding. I was not the one to attend family events because I knew that they were always demanding more of what you were ready to give, and I was not ready to start explaining myself to my parents and his parents. But it was inevitable because Marcus was a family-oriented person, so if his family calls, he will answer. I told him that I didn't want to go, but he pointed out that if the two of us did not show up, it wouldn't look good. So I agreed and we left after taking permission from my boss, Fisher. He granted me my request to travel on the condition that we were to go out again. I didn't want to disappoint Marcus, so I agreed to his condition. While with Fisher and I, things were normal between us whenever we ran into each other at work. He understands that I was married and what we had was just between us. We arrived at Marcus's parent house. They were welcoming at first. We settled in and they started asking different kinds of questions about children. I brushed it off and excused myself. Later that day, Marcus came to the room telling me how I disrespected his parents, but they were actually the one disrespecting me by bringing up something that should be between me and Marcus. Marcus didn't see that to point out, but he was ready to nail me. This was one of the main reasons why I didn't want to come. Indeed, I wanted children. Marcus did also. We had talked about it, and we decided when we were ready, we were going to start trying. Marcus knew this, so I was surprised that he couldn't tell his family this. Don't get me wrong, Marcus' parents are really nice people, but I don't like it when they meddle in their son's business. It has been what they have been doing since we were little. They could always tell their son who to be friends with, what to eat, where to go, etc. They basically controlled him. I decided to go see my parents and we caught up before I left. A few days later, our trip was cut short because Marcus had an impromptu meeting and we had to leave. The trip made me realize how much I missed my parents, but I made it a mission to visit them as often as I can. We got back in Marcus and we went back to our normal lives. I didn't know what to do, but I knew there was no way I was going to get out of going to dinner with Fisher. I decided to prepare for the dinner. Marcus kept asking me about where I was going, and I decided to tell him I was going to dinner with my boss. Marcus started talking about how it was wrong for me to go out with my boss, and I told him that it was the condition for going on the trip we went. I started to believe that it was then that Marcus began to suspect me and my boss because he started showing up at my workplace, and he began to buy me flowers at the office. I think he was doing a lot of PDA in order for my boss to get the message that I was married. I loved the attention I was getting. So one day Marcus came to pick me from work and we ran into my boss. My boss refused to say hello and he walked past us. I thought that was rude. But Marcus concluded that it was time for me to stop working at the company, and I told him that that was never going to happen. I was not quitting my job for any reason. We had a huge disagreement over it. I met up with my friends a few days later and I told them about what was going on between me and Marcus. My friends advised me not to quit my job because how was I going to survive without my job? We had a few drinks and Mary had suggested that we go out to a pool party she was invited to in order for us to get our minds off things. I was very grateful for my friends because they were always there for me anytime I was there. I trusted them to always cheer me up. I think that is why I can do absolutely anything for them. We went to a pool party and we had our fun. We got drunk and that day I didn't go back home. I was so drunk that I didn't know what had happened the previous night. But I knew within me that I had slept with some guys because I woke up feeling pain down there. I looked for my phone and I saw that I had missed a lot of calls from Marcus. I looked for my friends and I went back to their place to change and look presentable before going home. I didn't want Marcus to know what had happened. My friends were too drunk to even remember what had happened. I went back home and Marcus began to ask me different kinds of questions about me sleeping out when I'm married, and I had to explain to him that being locked up in a house and doing cooking and cleaning was not something I was cut out to do. If he needs someone who could be a stay-at-home wife, he definitely made a huge mistake marrying me because I was not made to be a stay-at-home wife. I want to explore the world, to be myself, to be able to enjoy my life and do things according to my own will. But after everything I explained to him, he didn't understand. He still had this type of thinking that the wife was just a workaholic and a babysitter. The next day I went to work and I tried to get my mind off things, but it wasn't possible. I didn't even know who I had slept with. But my friends told me that I should get my mind off it, and I did. But Marcus became a huge pain, and he kept asking me where I had been and all. I decided to tell him about the pool party, and he was literally disgusted by me. And he told me that he was not going to continue with me if I kept behaving like I wasn't married. But I thought to myself, maybe it was my fault that everything was happening between us, because if I had told him I wasn't really ready to be a stay-at-home woman, maybe there couldn't have been a wedding. I wished I was clear from the beginning. I told him I was going to reduce the partying and all, but honestly, I thought I had had enough after I couldn't remember what had happened at the pool party. But I felt like the man I married was not the boy I was friends with back in high school because he had changed. But I can't blame him because I had also changed myself. I wasn't the timid girl who hardly spoke, but I think that I should have made it clear. Marcus continued to tell me that he had lost trust in me and he needed to be sure if I had cheated on him. He advised me to think deeply and take my time before I lie to him because my answer could determine if our marriage is going to end. I thought long and hard, and I made the decision to tell Marcus about the series of affairs I had in our marriage. I thought that if I told him, maybe we were going to move past it, but my friends advised me not to. So when Marcus asked me again, I told him that I had never cheated on him in the course of our marriage, and he told me that he didn't believe me. I begged him to believe me, but he said he was only going to believe me if I took a DNA test. I didn't even know what the test was for, and so I decided to just go with it if it was going to put his mind at ease. But unknown to me that he was setting a trap for me and I was falling for it. A couple of days later, Marcus came with the results and he started to demand I tell him the truth. I was confused and I asked him what he was going on and on about. He showed me the test results. It showed that I had 3 different STDs. But how was that possible? I had been very careful, I thought to myself. I didn't know what to tell Marcus, and he left the house very angry. I wished I had been more careful. I wasn't even worried about Marcus at that point because I was more worried about myself because I had caught something I wasn't aware of. I met up with Fisher and Fisher behavior like I was some kind of dirt, and he blamed me that I might have infected him. He told me that he did not want to have anything to do with me, and so I should stop coming here and that he wanted to go and have himself checked. I kept on thinking back how I got this STDs. I had only been with Fisher apart from my husband. But I told myself that maybe it was Marcus that gave me the STDs. I went and confronted him about it, but he told me that he had himself checked recently and he wasn't infected. That was because he hadn't been with me in a while. I began to cry my eyes out because that came down to me being the problem. I began to think deeply, and I remembered that I had woken up at that pool party and I knew that I had sex that day, but I didn't know with whom. Marcus begged me to tell him the truth, and I had to tell him that I had been with multiple men within the period of our marriage. I told him that I didn't want to. It just happened. But I told him that I regretted everything and he should forgive me. Marcus told me that he thought that I was just going through a phase in my life unknown to him, that I had been taking him for a fool. Marcus went on about how he thought he had married his best friend and how I knew him for many years and I still cheated on him. Marcus was disappointed in me. I explained to him that I wasn't really happy being a housewife and I wasn't cut out to be a mother. I wanted to be free and have my own space and do everything that I wanted. Marcus told me that I shouldn't have married him either. I think it was at that moment I lost my best friend because I could see the disappointment in his eyes. I wished I was different. I wished I was who he thought I was. I wished I hadn't treated him that way. Marcus left the house and I didn't see him for weeks. I knew that he needed time to come to terms with everything. During that time, my parents had told me how disappointed they were in me and how I had embarrassed the family. Marcus had already informed his family, and I knew that it was going to have an impact on the relationship between our parents. A few days later, I was served with the divorce papers. Marcus told me that he didn't want to continue with the marriage anymore. He said that he was ready to put his life back together and I was not going to be in the same space as him. Marcus told me that he was not going to give me anything in the divorce and it was just best I sign it so that we could get it over with. I told him I didn't want to divorce him and he made it clear about how he was a traditional man, how he wanted children, how he wanted to come home to his wife and all. He told me that since I wasn't ready to give him that, and since I wasn't ready to stay faithful, it was wise for us to go our separate ways. I did agree with him that I couldn't give him all those things. It was not who I was. I knew I could go crazy with such a life. I agreed and I signed the divorce papers. I made my plans to go to the hospital and treat myself first before I could do anything else. It was finally my divorce was going to happen. I lost my best friend. I wished we never got married, maybe we could have still had each other. But I didn't want to cry over spilled milk anymore. After a few days, I met up with my friends and I told them about what had been going on. I told them to also get themselves checked because it was possible that we all caught something from that party. Marcus and I went our separate ways and Fisher couldn't even look at me anymore. He was avoiding me. I began to build my life and I made it a mission to be very careful and also change the way I live my life because it was a huge lesson learnt the hard way. Update, and this is an update to my last post. I just want to update you guys on what has been going on. So after the divorce, I decided to look for a job elsewhere. I didn't want to work at Fisher's company anymore because he became really unbearable and I looked for work elsewhere. I got treatment for my STDs. I was still in the process of healing. I knew I made some bad decisions and I wished Marcus could have accepted me the way I am. Things have not been easy for me. My parents have distanced themselves from me. My friends have been some sort of support I had received ever since. What I regret the most is I was never a good friend to Marcus. I wished we had just stayed friends. I not only destroyed our parents' relationship, but I also destroyed ours.